All right, everybody, here we go. We are on. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar, Mastering CISO Engagement, Factors Influencing Event Participation. We have a packed agenda, which we will jump into right away. But first, a couple of housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be made available online. You will all be notified when it is available. Also, we've received a number of questions in advance, which is great, and we've built some of those into the agenda, but please use Zoom if you'd like to add any, and we'll either get to it during the session or try to provide feedback after. Now, first and foremost, this webinar is brought to you by ISMG, the world's leading provider of an intelligence and education focused on cybersecurity and related areas. ISMG maintains 36 online media properties dedicated to various topics, verticals, and geographies with regards to cybersecurity. They manage hundreds of events each year. They maintain a cybersecurity education channel, cybered.io, and a marketing advisory arm, Cyber Theory, who is responsible for producing this session. And finally, we would not be here without CyberEd Board, ISMG's peer-to-peer networking community for practicing CISOs and other C-level executives responsible for IT and security for their organizations. And our panelists are brought here today via CyberEd Board. Now, I'm your moderator, Mike DiAgostino, General Manager of ISMG and Cyber Theory, and I'm joined by my colleague, Julie Jordan, Director of Marketing and Media Strategy with Cyber Theory. Julie, please say hello.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Great. Now, about those panelists, a quick introduction, and then we'll let each of them speak for themselves. So first, we've got Patty Ryan, the CISO with Quidel Ortho. We have Krista Arndt, the CISO with United Musculoskeletal Partners, and Karen Haberkos, CPO with University of Chicago Medicine. Say hello, everybody, and maybe, Patty, you can kick us off by telling us a little bit more about yourself and what you do for the organization.
Hi, everyone. No problem. Patty Ryan. I am the Chief Information Security Officer for a medical device manufacturer. If you go to the American Red Cross and get a blood test, if you go to Walgreens and buy a COVID test, you're going to probably be buying something that or using something that my firm produces. Everything from product marketing to R&D to manufacturing, etc., and enterprise security is within the domain.
Great. Thank you very much. Krista, how about you?
Hi, my name is Krista Arndt. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for UMP, and what we do is we are a national network of orthopedic practices, and UMP, as the parent organization, acts as an MSO to oversee and assist with operations and security and technology centralization and maturation and innovation. So we can support some of the best in class physicians across the nation. So we have brands under us like Resurgence Orthopedics, who is one of the largest in Georgia, Panorama out in Colorado, and a bunch of really great practices down in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And it's my job to build, oversee, mature, and innovate along with my CIO the cybersecurity program.
Fantastic. Appreciate the introduction. And last but not least, Karen.
Hi, so I'm Karen Haberkos. I'm the Chief Privacy Officer for the University of Chicago Medicine. We are an integrated healthcare system, an academic medical institution with a community health and hospital division and affiliated sites throughout Chicago and greater Northwest Indiana. We have a threefold mission of clinical care, research, and education.
Great. Well, appreciate the backgrounds, everyone, and maybe we can jump into it. So very good, diving into the session. So to set the stage here, because we're here to talk about events, right? Events are back. I feel like we were on shaky ground for a couple of years during the COVID-19 pandemic, but over the past year and a half or so, events have come roaring back. If two of the most notable cybersecurity events are any indication this year, the RSA conference and Black Hat, both of which just wrapped up over the past few months, both were thriving and point to a renewed desire, I think, for cybersecurity professionals to connect in real time, in real life. But what do our panelists, a microcosm of cybersecurity practitioners, look for to get them and their teams out to events? They have tough jobs. They take up a lot of time for their jobs. So what types of events are they attracted to? What do they hope to gain from attending these events? And how can events producers continue to create events that the community will ultimately gain from? So we have a laundry list of questions, again, and many of these submitted by our attendees in advance. And so I'd like to just jump in. So first question, first and foremost, considering where we are towards the end of 2023, still coming off a bit of the COVID-19 pandemic, dealing with economic uncertainty, wars, you name it, what specific criteria these days do you use to evaluate whether an event is worth the investment of time and resources for your organization? And maybe, Karen, you're first on my screen, so why don't I pick on you to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. For me, I'm the privacy officer here, and I truly believe that it's really important for privacy and security to be connected. So for me personally, I look for events that have interest in both areas, that serve privacy as well as security, and attempt to have sessions where, while it may focus on security, the talks also have some piece of privacy, or how privacy can interact with security, or how security officers and privacy officers can leverage each other. Healthcare is certainly my area of expertise, and it's under fire in many ways, not only financially, but in terms of security from ransomware attacks. And so data and patient safety is of the utmost importance. So areas where events can leverage both, for me, is what I'm looking for right now.
That's great. Yeah, and we see privacy as such a huge topic, and definitely intertwined with cybersecurity. I mean, even us as somewhat of a media company, when we get into our subscribers' personal data and the actions that they're taking on our websites, all of that, right? There's a huge privacy implication there, and we won't have time to get into it, but AI just brings a whole other realm to it. So maybe topic for another discussion. How about our other panelists, Krista or Patty?
Yeah, I'm going to actually piggyback off of that. My favorite events, and the ones that are most beneficial, are well-rounded in their approach to whatever the event is targeting. If you're targeting, technology, make sure that you have some sort of track that you cover, not only what the technology can do to solution your problems, right? You have to pinpoint the issues. And I think in a lot of these events, like, the issues that they're addressing aren't distinctly pinpointed. So I want all of the tracks. I want to know holistically from a technology perspective, a governance and administrative perspective, and if it feeds into it, which it doesn't always, but a physical perspective, how the problem can be solved, how folks are maybe innovating to solve unique challenges, especially in healthcare. There's such a diversity, even across hospital systems or specialty clinics, of challenges that we need to overcome. So there's no one right size answer for everything. And I think having those perspectives of how those challenges were solved uniquely, and not just trying to say, hey, this technology, can solve your problem, or, I don't think there's a lot of process approach sometimes to these events, and how process and, and people can help solve your problem. It is too heavily focused on technology.
Yeah. And there are some nuances there, and we'll get into the different types of events, whether they're the large trade shows or the more intimate executive roundtables. Each of those have different ways of structuring content and sessions, and where technology and solutions come into play. So we'll get into that. But good initial feedback. And how about yourself, Patty?
It's different criteria for different people within my organization, different roles. I do think that when you get into some of the more junior people, the experience of a large in-person conference, the experience of a Black Hat, the experience of an RSA, lets them see the different types of technologies. It's more of an exposure thing than necessarily core training. I do think that depending if you're technical security, it's good to occasionally hit a Black Hat or a DEF CON, because that's where you're going to hear live or have the opportunity to speak live with the people that are actually presenting the findings or the issues. That type of information is key. But for someone like myself, I look more towards things that are going to be, to Chris's point, well-rounded, but also small. I don't enjoy 45,000 people at a conference. You get lost, and I've done it too many times. So it becomes where do I think that I'm going to get the most communication with a peer network?
Got it. Got it. We'll talk more definitely about the smaller events and the peer-to-peer networking opportunities. So good, great initial feedback here. And maybe if we could just stick with the sort of larger trade show theme for a moment. How do you perceive the value of attending specifically those large trade shows? And again, the ones that come to mind for me are the RSA conference, Black Hat, maybe Info Security Europe. In the UK. There are lots of sessions, lots of educational opportunities, massive expo halls, lots of events going on the periphery of those large trade shows. So considering, time constraints and limited resources these days, how do you believe these larger trade show events could adapt to better cater to the needs of you guys, our audience here, CISOs and other C-level executives responsible for security and privacy? I mean, I get the sense based on what you're saying, Patty, that maybe you don't necessarily attend these events, maybe some of your staff does and they get something out of it, but is there anything that would get you to attend these events?
It's interesting you say that. I'm going to date myself. Many moons ago at Black Hat, there used to be a CISO day or CISO half a day, which was fantastic because it would take, I'll say, the most important, in air quotes, presenters, research, etc., but a small group of about 25 CISOs would meet. People would give the presentations and you would talk more real time. A cheat sheet, cliff notes for everything that's happening out there, but it gave you the context for the rest of the presentations or the rest of the sessions. Where may you want to deep dive or direct people or make contact with people that can help you better understand some of the stuff? Those types of things to focus CISO energies, but also bring a small team together was something I thought was fabulous. They did away with it, but it was great. And if we could do more of those, not to take away or make it a special group, but there's a different mindset for someone at our level than for someone who's a security engineer. And it's the ability to at least distill down so that we know the key points, or we can make our own decisions about what we want to think about more, rather than feeling like we have to be at every single presentation.
Absolutely. Great comments there. And how about for Krista or Karen?
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Krista. You first.
I was gonna say one of the coolest events that I actually attended this year, and I got an invite last minute, had not only the CISO get-togethers, which is super important for such a large event to feel, not so overwhelming, so we know that we're gonna have some dedicated time. But also they had different tracks. I keep coming back to that, like different tracks for, if you want to do some GRC discussion, if you want to do more technical discussion, so like security ops, they had, application security and administration, and then you tier that out for experiential level to say, hey, an intro to X, right? So in the titling of the sessions, intro to whatever concept it is, or intro to security operations monitoring. But you could also have something innovative, like talking about, the cybersecurity mesh architecture, right? For folks who are more experienced in their career. So you draw not only the CISOs, you get that, tight-knit group, which we really like, because there are a lot of things that are shared that have to stay in that tight-knit group, and, a lot of experience to share there. But also then we get a breakout to say, hey, I want to see, because I don't get to do it every day, what is, up and coming when it comes to monitoring and, logging, et cetera, or, governance, what innovation is happening on the third party risk management front or something of that nature has been, that was one of the best events from an idea of what I gained from it and the investment. And then also those sessions, well, a lot of the large events are available after the fact if you had to miss one because maybe there are 3 at the same time that you thought you really would have loved to attend.
Well, you have me on the edge of my seat. I have to ask, what was the event?
It was actually Gartner this year.
Oh, Gartner. Okay.
National
Okay.
Harbor. Yeah, it was my first
Yeah.
time. And the content and just the, what you could attend, the choices were awesome. And the content was, phenomenal. So I think something like that and following that type of, makeup of an event, maybe not as huge or maybe as huge. It was just really beneficial.
Good, good. Yeah, I've been to some Gartner events, definitely worthwhile content-wise. Not quite to the scale of the RSA conference or Black Hat, but perhaps a little bit more focused. Yeah. And how about you, Karen?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Patty and Krista said is true. I think having special sessions or carved out half day or full day, either at the beginning or the end of a conference, that is specific to leadership helps, because I do think the focus is different. Being able to have smaller groups where you're talking strategy, I think it also helps me when there are breakout sessions specific to industry. So when you can meet with peers, so in my example, you can meet with peers from healthcare, not necessarily people that I would normally hang with, because I can reach out to them anytime, but to meet other people from across the country or across the world in healthcare to find out what they're doing differently, perhaps, than what I'm doing. And then, of course, because I'm the lone CPO on this panel, I mean, anything to me where you can engage privacy and security officers together who are, not your own that you might normally work with, so that you can come back and say, here's what I heard, is working for this group, and, perhaps we should try this. I think from a technology standpoint, from my point of view, I like to hear from folks. So the security team is going to leverage this technology. How can the privacy team also use this simultaneously? Especially when organizations are competing for resources. It's easier sometimes to get resources when the two teams can use something together. There's just much more ability to push that through from a resource perspective. And it also gives both teams the opportunity to collaborate before something happens or an incident, for example, happens, and then everybody has to, get together. That type of ability to collaborate in advance on things like technology help when, things really come down to it and the teams have to work together.
I have to add to that. She actually hit on 2 really good points. So myself and my compliance officer are attached at the hip. We never make a decision without just consulting each other because we're both masters in different domains and we have different perspectives, and security tools and tech tools are meant to solve both challenges. But if you want a unicorn, figure out how to also get the CFO engaged, because at the end of the day, that's who also controls our budget. So, while it's our job to tell a story to them, sometimes experiencing these things firsthand when they don't have direct experience and for it not to feel overwhelming, it is really neat and helps us a lot to develop a very close trust relationship with our CFO to help advance our cause and advance our programs and get resources.
Great comments.
Just to piggyback on that one more time, I think the storytelling is so important. I mean, I think just presenting something doesn't make sense, but I think if you can tell the real story for your organization, that's where it's going to hit home.
I had a question to follow up with you on that, Krista, when you were talking about how much you like the Gartner events and how exciting the sessions were for you, or how rich or whatever. What was it about those sessions that actually was like the bell ringing moment? Were they given by vendors who were trying to show you their solutions? Were they given by thought leaders or influencers, or or Gartner experts or analysts. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So I'm going to say my favorite and most impactful sessions were a combination of the two, and not just talking about their general experiences as being a security leader, but focusing on a specific problem and how they solutioned it together as a partnership. And really focusing heavily on the conceptual side of that, not just like we did it by onboarding our tool, but conceptually, like, here's what we were trying to solve, to solve your larger problem. Here are the kind of like sub problems that we were able to pinpoint to help you get to solving your like overall issue. And also focusing on a very good ratio of like innovation but hygiene, because it is still difficult for us to get buy-in oftentimes for just basic, good hygienic security practices or support for those types of solutions and process maturation, etc. So I think that it was definitely a good combination, but it was not so heavily focused in those partnerships on the technology and how great the tech is, but it was really problem centric, and they actually input, because as Gartner does, they do a lot of like insights into like statistical analysis of industries, what worked, what didn't work, and it just seemed very well thought out and well rounded.
Kind of a case study driven style.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Because we already don't have like budget. It's hard for us to get budget, right? Especially with the way the economy is right now. We have to, I'm solutioning vulnerability management, helping with open source hacker tools because, I used them in past lives and that's going to help me, get to the end. So how can you also work with other solution providers to help provide me even better visibility or, a better solution to that instead of just, thinking that I have the money to spend on a tool? Because chances are if you help me solution something up front and say, hey, I'm going to help you solve your problem with minimal investment, I am more apt to continue that long-term relationship and to want to learn more about you and your events and products, etc., just because we both kind of met in the middle and we're like, hey, I'm going to invest my time and, help you reputationally, for example, and you're going to help me to solve my program challenges. And then, maybe we can help each other out in the future because it benefits our security program, our patients, etc.
Thank you.
That's great. That's great input. And I think my takeaways here are that the larger of the large trade shows, they're still of interest. It sounds like there's an opportunity for different people within the organization to attend those events and get something out of it. But the events organizers, it would behoove them to create some specialty sessions or tracks specific to different job functions and title levels. To Patty's point, if you can go to a large trade show like that and there is a track or an opportunity for just CISO or C-level centric networking or input or education, that would be worthwhile for her to potentially attend. Maybe you do some things on the periphery, like scroll through the expo hall, but otherwise, just to go to an event, a large trade show, and have a whole mass of seemingly unrelated sessions in education might not be as attractive for a CISO or a C-level executive. Well, how about we take it down a notch? You have your sort of destination event type trade shows, but then you have the regional summits, right? These would be your smaller, maybe one day, maybe at the most 2 days, lots of sessions, some networking opportunities, etc. Can the panel comment on those types of events? There are lots of them. They take place all over the world. Are you personally going out to those events? Do you have people on your staff go to those events? Are there certain like topics or things that you look at for those events that you would find more valuable? Like, where do you stand on the whole like smaller regional summit type of event?
I'll start. If anyone would like to hold one in Burlington, Vermont, I probably would attend. That right now is an issue. Obviously, the closest place is Boston. So for me, it's real time. If I travel someplace and I travel for 4 hours on a plane versus traveling 4 hours in a car, it's still traveling 4 hours. And it becomes, what am I going to get out of it? So it depends on the duration of the topics and who's hosting it. And who's going to be there. Again, medical device, a lot of the times the regional ones, it's for general information. I can make contacts for general threats or what's happening in finance, etc. But when you're trying to get into how you're going to handle the NMPA's new standards, or how you're going to handle the FDA's new standards, or what about this or that, it's sometimes difficult to do it regionally unless you are in the Farm Belt in New Jersey or some other area around Boston. So some of the regional ones for my team may be okay depending on the topic, but they're not as robust as ones that if you're going to make the commitment to travel, because it's an expert and it's a very, very detailed agenda that is in line with what you need to better understand. Now, I'd rather pay for that for someone than just like a half day or a day locally where they don't get that much out of it.
Yeah, great comment on the topic portion of that. I'll come back to it, but how about our other panelists, Karen or Krista?
Yeah, I mean, I think what Patty says is probably a real challenge for her. I'm in Chicago, so I think it's less of a challenge. In Chicago, there are lots of regional conferences in Chicagoland area. The travel is not necessarily as much of a hindrance probably for a one-day event. For those, I think it just, again, depends, to Patty's point, it depends on the topic, it depends on the industry focus. I think I tend to send my staff more to those types of events because the travel is easy, and it's easier from a financial perspective to, if we have to pay for, a one-day event, the travel is easy from people to travel home to the event in Chicago and then back. And so I think those are useful more for my staff as opposed to myself. But I would attend them if they have a healthcare focus, or there's something very specific that I see in the agenda that makes sense. And it usually needs to be more than one item in the agenda. So I don't know that I would go, to a whole day if there's only one session that makes sense for me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm kind of like I straddle both of you as far as the locale. So I am about 60 miles outside of Philadelphia physically, although corporate is down in Atlanta. And I have three major markets, and Philadelphia isn't one of them. But Philadelphia, because I'm in healthcare, is one of the best regions for connecting with other healthcare leaders who are very engaged in our, CISO and security community. So I'm doing a couple different things this year to try to get a handle on it. Not only have I gone to a very small few large events because they had really great reputations and just a lot of content that I could pick and choose from. My favorite, one of my favorites regionally is Secure World, and I'll tell you the reason for that is it brings that networking together for me of other healthcare security leaders who, we'll talk here and there, maybe through LinkedIn or through email, but you really get face to face and you get to interact with them, and you actually get to get heavily involved in, where the content goes with Secure World to make sure it's a benefit to you. So a lot of the local events, I like to be involved in kind of the planning or the advisory committees to make sure that it's not only going to be of benefit to people like me in my position, but that there's still going to be content, to Karen's point, for my teams who, we don't have a lot to invest in training. We have to be very selective because, budgets are very tight. So the regional events, I'd rather them be, something that is very beneficial for my teams who don't get to travel to national events, and then to hold some sort of peer or networking sessions. For me, I do it regionally, usually to meet, security folks in the area and to kind of engage with groups in that area. Like I'm traveling actually to Denver and Dallas because they're my markets, and I traveled to the one in Atlanta this year for Secure World to just engage and meet my security cohorts in that region and get to know them and get some FaceTime and talk about their challenges and see if there are any, differences per region, per sector, et cetera. to kind of benchmark where I'm at and figure out in the year coming, where do I want to dedicate my time most to events? If I want to stay in my region, in the Atlanta region, is it more beneficial to pay to travel? And then things like HIMSS and HISAC for healthcare, for example, are hugely beneficial because they are industry specific. So I think it is definitely going to vary by industry as well. It's difficult. I know there's one peer who doesn't even do what I do, but lives in this area. I worked with him previously, who has a hard time getting accepted to an ISAC because he doesn't really fit the mold of any of them. And it's hard for him to find peers who share his challenges. And I actually met someone else at a small local peer networking event regionally a couple weeks ago who's in shipbuilding, and he doesn't know anybody. And it just turns out I worked in shipbuilding long ago for the government sector. So I was like, hey, I could probably connect you to someone in a different region. But that peer networking for regional events has been invaluable. You might not get the information immediately up front, but it usually benefits you down the road.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And here's I think all of you hit the nail on the head. I mean, one thing we've witnessed, because we do run our own events here at our parent company, ISMG. When we first started, it was okay to go to different cities and host a, Chicago Cybersecurity Summit, or a, San Francisco Cybersecurity Summit. But over the years, with how saturated the events market has become, especially in some of the major markets, I don't think it's good enough just to say, maybe it would work in Vermont. Maybe we could have a Vermont Cybersecurity Summit and people would come out and you can cover a wide range of different topics and sessions. But nowadays it feels like, especially in the larger, more served markets, that there needs to be something more to it. There needs to be a specific topic or an industry focus or some kind of theme that's an indication to the registrants and attendees that you're going to get deeper information out of this, as opposed to a day of disparate sessions that don't really go together, but you're there just because there aren't a lot of events in that region. We've definitely witnessed that over time. Yeah. Julie, anything you'd like to add?
Well, I just was thinking that it's an interesting thing to mention HIMSS, and that's basically the industry healthcare trade show from a broad standpoint, not necessarily cybersecurity. And you're all kind of in that sector, so we would get one perspective on that industry. But do you find that these larger industry focused shows versus cybersecurity shows are building better or useful cybersecurity tracks now, or is that still kind of sleepy, veiled content that's not making its way to kind of a primary position? If you go to the,
I think, well, I mean, I'll just start very briefly. I mean, I think HIMSS now does have a day for CISOs, so I think that probably helps the HIMSS group. To your point, Krista, about why that might appeal more to the CISOs. Personally, I would like to see them do things for CPOs. That would be great, or something jointly for CISOs and CPOs. But I'll allow my fellow panelists to sort of talk about their experience at HIMSS.
I was just going to say, you hear all this talk about like security leaders and solving business challenges, and it depends on the organization you work for, whether you have to be more heavily technical if you're developing an application or a product, versus if you are just solving day-to-day business challenges and not really getting into development or anything deeply technical. But what I like to hear organizations or shows like HIMSS are going to be more, I get more of a firsthand experience of the business challenges beyond just what my folks talk to me about. And I understand that business challenges are all unique, but it offers me additional perspective to hear things from, what other folks are struggling with in other lines of business and healthcare and other specialties, where, because we're so spread out amongst different markets, and there's only, a small handful of security team members who have the capability to travel and just kind of be there firsthand on the front lines and listen and talk to folks, to collectively get different people in a general area who have different subject matter expertise, different jobs, different perspectives on their roles in the organization. Like having Karen on here as a CPO, I could talk about that all day because healthcare has always been so HIPAA-centric, but to build a security program, there's so much more to it these days than just being HIPAA-centric, right? Like we have to take PCI into scope, and depending on your organization, if you have medical devices and if you do international business, like you have to worry about other things besides what folks used to just write, programs on that HIPAA security manual. Like it's so much more complex these days. To understand the complexities of what other people are experiencing helps me to right size my program, what I volley for as far as solutions and, resources, etc.
So there's a value in the business, connecting with your business peers, even if they're not exactly in security, but they're in your industry.
Of course. Yeah.
Okay, great.
I think it also needs to be, to that point, Chris, it needs to be thought about more globally. I mean, I think we talk about this now. I mean, healthcare must move beyond HIPAA at this point. If you do, I kind of feel like if you don't have HIPAA down yet, then that's a whole nother discussion. And so, you really have to look at things from a global community. And medical tourism for the United States is happening. And, we have to be able to adjust to all of, at least in privacy too. And then that goes to working with security. Is all of the international data privacy laws impact security in ways that HIPAA may not have in the past.
Good. Well, good. Hopefully you're seeing a theme here. We started with the large trade shows. We moved down to regional summits. Now I'd like to spend a couple minutes, if we could, and focus on more of the intimate executive roundtables. I think you've all have hinted at that desire for peer-to-peer connections, right? Others that are in your same type of position. So a few different talking points here is one, do you attend executive roundtables? I'd be surprised if you weren't all getting invitations almost every day to attend these events. So number one, do you attend them? And then number two, you don't have to name any names, but can you think of a couple of events, if you've attended them, that A, were very positive, that you felt like you really got something out of those events, and then B, were there any that you walked away with thinking that maybe it wasn't a great use of your time? And what were the reasons for both of those?
I think for me, the roundtables, again, I could find some restaurants in Vermont if people want to come up here, but it's some of it is really vendor centric. It's about a product. It's very much, if I feel like I'm going to sit through a 2-hour sale call with a nice piece of steak. And honestly, that's not how I want to spend my time, because that to me is not the best use of it. It's not just about the tool. 2 points. What are you trying to accomplish with this? And it seems to be a lot of the same topics over and over again. It's the cloud, now it's Gen AI, and it's threat intel, and it's hackers. It's the same things. So you don't see anything that really diversifies the topic. They all kind of get lumped together. I recently just got back from a small group. I traveled for it, but it was about 16 of us for 2 days. The people that were there did the presentations. It was a lot of time to talk. It was all CISO levels. If the vendors were there, it was the CEO, and there weren't sales pitches. It was really got into the problems in a very diverse group. So I spent 48 hours in a place where I could, and it was Chatham rules, you could say anything. So it was probably the best, not only for networking, but also just pure information to understand what these different people are doing, challenges they face. Global organization and finance has the same challenges as I do, yet different. How are you guys handling different country specific requirements, etc. So that was just the environment, and it was the ability to take the time to really talk, not necessarily about the, okay, cocktail hour starts at 5 and then dinner starts at 6 and the presentation starts at 7.
That's
So,
great. Yeah, keep going.
I was going to say, you hit on something again. So I'll totally call them out because they did an amazing job. Cybersecurity Collaboration Forum. It's very popular for the CISO community here in the greater Philadelphia area. Haven't been to any other regions yet, but you get together in these groups and essentially problem solve and like noodle together, right? And then you all have a couple different questions and you talk amongst yourselves, and then you have a table leader. And you actually have a vendor at rep at each table that has some different thing that goes along with the theme of the night, but the rep doesn't sit there and like try to sell you the product. You actually sit together and they try to help you solve the problem, like based on the questions that you're given. And then once you guys are done with your discussion, you then have somebody at each table present, what are your thoughts on the 3 or 4 questions that you gleaned out of the group, and how did you solve whatever, or how do you address whatever the topic was? And actually, I had some really good conversation with a major risk vendor that has been around for years and years, and has always been thought of as, they're so expensive and they only solve like large organization risk challenges, where I learned a lot about them and some of their initiatives coming up that I didn't realize that, trying to cater to folks in more of mid-markets to solve those challenges in an affordable way. And we gave feedback through our conversation and solving those problems about things that would be awesome to see from them or other vendors similar in the future that could help them really relate to other markets. And then it was hilarious because, again, like Chatham rules, right? We got to kind of laugh and discuss, and we had dinner or food or whenever you want to have it. And everybody had a really good time. And the attendees were, and again, it's that core group of leaders with some new folks in there that, had a lot to offer. And I just feel like not only did we have a good time and it was beneficial, but we got to network while solving challenges and hearing other people's perspectives and kind of connecting with vendors to really let them know what our challenges are, because I feel like they just, like, the dynamic changes a lot based on the economy and, what the business decides to do, the next month, because planning isn't as, there's more agility required in business planning to weather the economy right now.
Absolutely. And that's good to hear that you had a positive experience with vendor contributions there. And I think you nailed it that, sending a sales rep potentially or a product marketer you might not get the most out of it, right? But if you have someone that's more of a true peer that can really understand, the trials and tribulations that you're going to, that can contribute to the conversation in a non-product centric way, that's how you're going to get the most out of those interactions. How about you, Karen? Do you attend these from a privacy point of view?
Yeah, I mean, so in the general privacy world, we don't have these types of things that CISOs have in terms of executive roundtables. We don't have a lot of privacy-centric tools, if you will. There's only a few on the market. So I think that's probably why it doesn't happen in the same way. That being said, I do get invited to these quite a bit. I often don't go because I think one of two things: either it is very topic focused and it is tool or vendor focused, and I don't know that that's very useful for privacy. That being said, when something new and for lack of a better word, exciting comes out, like Gen AI, I might go to something like that so that I can get a perspective on what that means. I mean, I certainly understand the privacy rules and regulations, and I'm not sure it really matters what the latest and greatest is. The laws and the regulations are typically the same, but I might want to find out, what does this mean? And what does this mean from a security perspective, so that I can go back to my CISO or the security team and try to understand better what they are struggling with, so that I can make some recommendations about what does this look like from a privacy or security by design or, some sort of architecture perspective when we're trying to meet the regulations. So I don't know that I attend them as often as my CISO peers would.
That's okay. And how about just on a side note, do any of you get invited or you go to any of these like virtual roundtables, or I don't think there's virtual trade shows or virtual summits. Are those something on your radar?
I've gone to several mixed reviews. Again, it gets back to who's sponsoring it, the quality of the discussion leaders or topics, and also, especially the virtual, how distracted are people? If the participants don't have their cameras on and are multitasking because they just want to get through it, that's going to affect the whole dynamic of the entire group. And it becomes, you feel sometimes, I've been in ones where there's like 3 people talking, but there's 20 people present. Those don't feel the same as far as information sharing.
I think you're right, Patty. Those are harder when there's larger groups of people. And I think they probably work better when it's more curated, maybe. The invitees are more curated in a smaller group.
Yeah.
Great.
We had no one-on-one breakout sessions with vendors. I think we can all agree with that after the last conversation.
Hey, you're reading my notes here because that's the last question here, and trying to be sensitive of time. We just have another 5 or 8 minutes left, and then we need to wrap up. But you read my mind. So you see, we've gone from the trade shows to the regional summits to the executive roundtables. How about those one-to-one meetings? Where do they fit in? Do you go to them? Do you get invited to them? Do you send other people to them? Is there any value to them? What are your thoughts?
What else?
They are just, I will talk to the people who are trying to engage me and invite me to these sessions. Like, I don't want to meet anybody. I know that's how you make your money. I don't want to meet anybody, because 9 times out of 10, I sit in these meetings and it's, hi, tell us the problem you want us to solve. You selected us. I didn't select you. I was told I have to talk to you and tell me about yourself. I'm not going to share my problems. I don't know who you are.
Therapist.
Why am I going to tell you my your problems? You have no NDA. You have no idea who you are. So I understand that's how the sponsorship drives the ability to have these shows, but it's just awful, in my opinion.
How about if you were to turn that into arranged meetings with other CISOs, peers, like one-to-one meetings that were arranged for you that you got to select from who you might want to meet with and talk with specifically? Is there any value in that if you're going to an event?
It really, one-to-one meetings, you don't know the other people. I think small groups are far more effective if you're trying to understand and navigate common concerns or issues. I think one-on-one with another CISO person may be completely different concerns, completely different background, and it really depends on the ability to communicate in a short period of time. It's only normally 20 minutes, half an hour for these. I would say get rid of them and start focusing on those smaller groups.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've been in both situations. So I've been in situations where the product doesn't have, they're a newer product in the market, which is really common, right? Like they're trying to make their name in the market. They may be awesome, but they may not just be a fit for what I'm trying to do. And the description of that was a little bit misleading. And then when you get on, you're like, I feel bad, but like from the description, I thought you could solve an entirely different problem. And then they want to, go through it anyway and see if they can solve other problems, which more often than not, they really can't. And for the one-on-one CISO ones, I've actually been to events where they'll like you pre-select a list and they set you up, and stuff comes up with CISOs, and like unfortunately we try to honor our commitments, but sometimes we have no choice, and then these folks don't show up, and then you're I like networking, you're paired with someone else, but it's not entirely like maybe that one person and finally getting their time was the reason you went to an event. So to Patricia's point, like maybe doing very small groups that you get paired with or something like that at events would be a way that you could avoid that happening.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think for me, I've gone to something like this one time, and I don't know that it's useful much for me. I think a lot of times, so I would say that the talking sessions that they have in between the meetings made sense for me, but the vendor meetings not so much. And because they're not really tools that, you know, I would be procuring. My team might use them as a parallel, but it's really the security officer's call whether that is going to be implemented. And it's challenging to explain that to people, and they want to keep reaching out and wanting to meet again. And you know, I try to say to them, like, I'm not sure I'm the right person that you want to be talking to. So yeah, that's a challenge.
Well, that's a good response, Karen, because I've heard from others they would, if they get hounded like that, they would just put them on a, block list for a year and then wait until they're in good graces to come back and engage with them. So at least you're trying to educate them. But no, we hear this feedback often when it comes to these types of events, and unfortunately, there's a purpose to them, which is to get into a sales conversation, right? And all the other events that we talked about, the trade shows, the summits, the executive roundtables, there's much more of an opportunity for education and knowledge sharing. There probably is a place for the one-to-one meetings if you are very specific on a certain technology or something that you are going to implement, and if you can get into a rapid fire 6 or 8 meetings with very targeted sponsors or vendors that apply to that technology or solution, then you can get through some of these meetings and get good input in a rapid manner. But otherwise, for a general type of session, perhaps other types of events are better self-served. So good. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm so surprised the time has just flown by. I know I've personally got notes here on just a wide range of nuggets that I pulled out from our panelists on all different types of sessions and events formats. But before we wrap up, any closing comments from anyone that you'd like to share, any advice you'd like to impart for all the events organizers out there?
I mean, I think mine is pretty simple. Just know your audience, or what you're actually trying to accomplish with the event, and then who will be attending, or who typically attends, and that might help.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's probably the top takeaway for me is for any type of event, doesn't matter the size or format. Long gone are the days where you could just, I was joking around before, just throw a Vermont Cybersecurity Summit and people flock to it. Nowadays, there needs to be a little bit more something substantive to get people to want to attend, a little bit more specific based on a topic or a certain title or job function. That's really what's going to draw people to these events. So good. Well, wanted to thank everyone again. This has been a fantastic discussion. Hopefully our attendees have gotten something out of it. Once again, we're going to make this session available. Once the recording is complete, everybody will get notified. And thank you everybody for joining again. And thanks one more time to CyberEd Board. All of our panelists here are members of the CyberEd Board. If you're interested in checking it out, it's cyberedboard.io, and hope to see you at one of our future sessions. Thank you very much.